Drawing is the foundation. It's literally a pencil on paper. There's no tricks, there's nothing fancy. It's just this one tool on this page, and you can really develop so much of your skill if you just practice that, if you just refine that, explore that. Hi everybody, my name is Andrew Gable and welcome to my video. I'm going to be doing a line drawing. This is sort of the beginning stages of creating your art to look alive or three-dimensional. I'm going to share a few principles that I've discovered, and that will help you understand a little bit more about how I'm approaching this drawing, how I'm seeing it, and what I'm doing. I found there's three primary components to creating the illusion of a three-dimensional space onto a flat surface. The first one is perspective. Put simply, perspective is the idea that as objects come forward, they get larger, and as they move into the background and into the space in the background, they get smaller and smaller and smaller. Simplistically, that's what perspective is. The second core component is value. Value is the principle that as objects come forward on the page or in the space, they become darker. And as they move backwards, they become lighter and lighter and lighter. I've come to realize or view this principle working because as things move further into the distance, you have more atmosphere in between you and the subject. And therefore, the subject becomes lighter and lighter and lighter as it goes off into the distance. And the final principle is light. And that simply refers to there being a light source and a dynamic of light and absence of light, which is shadow, that determines the shape or structure of forms on your page. This can be seen as like modeling, the modeling of a form. This is happening because there's this presence of light in this reality. So those are the three components that I wanted to introduce you to today: perspective, value, and light. I think a lot of people start with line drawings before they learn, for instance, shading. So I thought I would start with a line drawing and sort of introduce some of these principles while trying to keep things a little more simplistic. And this was a really fun drawing. I'm thinking of Vincent van Gogh offhand, his drawings of like fields that have just beautiful motifs and textures and line, and he creates these marvelous patterns in his artwork. They're very linear and they have a strong linear quality to them. Another artist that comes to mind is Michelangelo. If you think of his drawings, they have a really strong outline. His forms are defined very strongly with a line. So let's get into the drawing. All right, so I'm getting started on the line drawing here, and the very first step to do is to actually rough in your subject and place it onto your page. And I like to get it centered. I mean, it depends on how I'm aligning the composition. In this case, I'm just placing the subject, which is the plant, in the center, more or less in the center of the page. It's really important at this stage to consider that, to consider not to place your subject too high or too low, and you're going to end up cutting some of it off. Try and get it nicely centered. I find, for me anyways, I love balance, so I like to have things balanced in the center, or like asymmetrical off-center, but still balanced. Now I'm moving into the line, and I'm being pretty direct with the line. Like, I like a nice, solid line that's going to sort of be, to sort of define that shape really well so I can see it. And I'm also sort of understanding at this stage, like, how these lines are going to be interacting within the drawing and what kinds of different lines are going to emerge. I find when you're creating art, you know, the technique also emerges as you create it because you observe things on your drawing. So observational drawing is as much about observing your drawing as it is observing the subject that you're drawing. So you've got to pay attention to both. You got to pay attention to what's happening on your page. So yeah, I'm just continuing to put in the leaves of the plant, and you know, also I'm starting to put in they're like these little sticks that sort of fill the bottom of the plant pot. and they were a little harder to see. Like you know, the subject was about 5 feet away from me, so I couldn't necessarily see these sticks that was making up the bottom of the plant pot, but I did, you know, I could see some sort of motif or texture or pattern in those sticks that I ended up sort of started creating my own pattern using line that represented those sticks that became a visual element in the drawing, because it's like each part or aspect of the drawing could potentially be a new sort of friend you invite to the party that makes the party interesting. If everything's just the same, then it's like you're just talking to yourself all the time. So here I'm just working now on the pot, and the pot was really interesting. It had some sort of some really tiny lines that were kind of embedded into it, and you'll see I put them in later to sort of give it some visual dynamism. Again, now going around the back, figuring out how to put in those sticks and how to represent the sticks in the bottom of the plant pot. And there I darkened a line, you could see, and this is where I start to sort of pull some of the lines forward using value and perspective, meaning I start to darken and thicken lines, and what that does in a drawing is it gives the illusion of those lines coming more forward. So the principle of value is things that are darker come forward, and the principle of perspective is things that are larger appear forward, and then they get smaller and smaller as they go into the background. Now, for value, things become lighter and lighter as they go into the background, where the darker points come forward. So you can see this plant is like the main subject, so I am allowing myself to darken some of those lines because I do want it to stand out as the main subject. And if you observe closely the drawing, you'll notice your eye will jump from dark point to dark point. So some of the darkest spots in the drawing, I find my eye actually looks at those almost by themselves and looks at all the dark spots, and there's like a rhythm that is created within that. But I'm also not like overthinking it. I'm just using that basic principle of dark lines tend to come forward, and as I darken those lines, I actually observe my drawing to see if this is actually true. So don't take my word for it. You know, you have to find and discover through observation and through application how to make your own drawings come to life. So yes, there's sort of base and core principles, but you can also discover your own through good and keen observation. So here I've sort of discovered, you know, I've realized also that I'm going to have to invent some of these lines that make up the base of the plant and all the sticks in there, because they were dark. I couldn't really see them, but I could see them a little bit, and so I started getting a feel for what they were and how they sort of appeared and how I could represent them. And it opened up, you know, an opportunity to create a really dynamic visual element in the drawing using pure line. So I basically outlined the idea of these little sticks. And there's those lines that I was talking about in the pot plant that I thought would sort of give the pot its sort of unique signature, differentiated from the background or the leaves. So basically, yeah, I've got my plant pretty much in there. And now I'm going to start with the background. It's sitting on a table. And I like to hand draw. I'm not much of a ruler guy. I've always preferred just to go pure organic and test my own ability to draw a straight line. Like, how capable are you of drawing a perfectly straight line? So I do challenge myself within doing that to try and to practice becoming effective at this expression, and to take away friction where sometimes having to go and pull out a ruler is like a point of slowing the process down. Maybe I'm just impatient, but I like to sort of go with the organic line, and I find that sort of suits my style. Those are some canvases in the back. Like I've got some canvases kind of laying against the wall, and as I'm drawing, you know, I'm looking for different parts of this this subject that I'm representing to create, patterns and rhythms and, like the little staples in the back on the canvas were these unique diagonal lines in the drawing. So that's what I love about drawing, is it's like an opportunity to create it's very musical, to create a song, so to speak, a rhythm. All right, let's see here. Oh yeah, I forgot one of the leaves. Somehow it snuck out of my vision, and so I'm putting it in now. And it's not exact. It's somewhat exact, and that's why I like using plants, because they're organic shapes, so you can be a little more they're a little more forgiving, and you can kind of move them around a bit. And they had a beautiful texture or pattern, or like the leaves had this pattern on the inside, and it made a great visual expression that I could put in and use to represent those leaves. It just gave a little more interest to the drawing. Now I'm just putting in my apron, a piece of cloth back there, and actually there's these little jagged things right there that I put in, which I thought were so cool. Like, they're so unassuming, but I thought it made a nice little addition to the drawing. Putting some wood grain in. And yeah, I think I'm getting close now to the end of this drawing. I mean, I wanted to use line and represent it. I eventually start putting in some line on the table that the plant is sitting on, and in retrospect, I think I could have done it darker. It would have really pushed it and gave that part of the drawing a little more visual dynamic, a little more impact. But that's in retrospect, and now I know for the next one, I'm going to push the patterns a little bit more. I'm going to push, the line, make it more expressive and more bold. I think I can make a really interesting drawing by doing that. This one is a little bit more subtle, and but I was happy with how the first drawing turned out. And that's pretty much it, darkening that table to pull it forward. It's part of the foreground, so I wanted that to sit in the foreground. Didn't put any shadows or anything in this drawing. No, not using any light or dark. I'm just using line to represent the forms and to differentiate between the different forms and subjects in the drawing. So there you have the finished drawing of the plant. So you can really do a lot with just line, and I would encourage you all to sort of experiment and bring that element into your drawings. It's just this was a really fun exercise for me to do, and I'm looking forward to continuing this process of drawing and doing line drawings. So I did this one line drawing, and I'm thinking, dang, like, oh man, I could do this, I could go this direction. So it was really interesting to see that part of me that likes to get better at drawing start to awaken again and be like, hey, that's what's amazing about creating art, is you don't need to travel to Italy, you don't need to travel around the world. You can develop your skill to a really high level with literally what's in your environment. And I think that's one of the reasons why I started with drawing, because drawing is the foundation. It's literally a pencil on paper. There's no tricks, there's nothing fancy. It's just this one tool on this page, and you can really develop so much of your skill if you just practice that, if you just refine that, explore that. And I think that's just a cool point of keeping things simple, keeping it easy, and realizing that you have a lot that's at your fingertips that you can utilize to develop this skill at its core level, at its fundamental level.